to Spirited Dialogue, hosted by Transformity. I'm Gautam Palapa,
I'm Asanka.
and today we want to revisit the topic of experience economies that we had started a dialogue on in the beginning of 2023. In that episode, Asanka and I discussed the evolution of an organization from a product centric culture to a service centric culture, and finally evolving into an experience centered culture as the aspirational or target state. And we had posited that customer behavior had changed in recent times, so we need to have an outside in approach when designing systems and products. And it has to be focused on the experience that a customer has. We need to incorporate feedback loops that can help us quickly learn if the customer is having a positive experience or a negative experience and tweak it rapidly without overall degradation of the quality of experience. And as you can imagine, this requires more agility, more iterative approaches to architecture and development, more emphasis on business architecture, on lean experiments, blue green deploys, and A B testing. And the competitive edge for organizations will truly come through these experiences that we provide our customers. And so we need to have a seamless omni channel approach to these experiences that require not just context awareness, but situational awareness and understanding needs of the customer in a more deeper way. And this is where experience economies are being built into customer experiences and not just products and services. If you missed the episode, we'll provide a link to it in the show notes. And we touched upon different ways by which we can build these experience centered cultures. And some listeners requested a deeper dive into this topic, and that is what we'll be targeting today. So, in this episode, Asanka and I will be talking about digital doubles and how we can fuse identity and personality in an experience economy. But before we start, I do want to make a clarification up front. When we use the term digital double, we are not talking about avatars or personifications of humans in virtual reality or the metaverse. Those, from my point of view, are projections of a user into a digital space. They are predetermined, and while there are some learning and modification involved, it is limited and mostly a manifestation of how the user wants to be portrayed and wants to interact in a virtual world. And you know what? Maybe they will evolve in the future, but as they stand today, avatars or digital projections are not created to improve the experience of the human in the real world. And instead, they're intended to provide passive gratification by escaping from reality. So, having said all that, Asanka, could you give us a brief overview of what a digital double is for people who may need a refresher?
Yeah, I think you gave a really good clarification of what digital double is as what it is not. So the same thinking I had when I came up with this term way back in 2016. So I'll give a little bit of history on how this concept came to my mind. So I got invited to give a keynote at one of the large conferences about the digital architecture. When I was thinking about this concept while traveling to this conference, it was a long flight, like 18-hour flight, and randomly I watched this movie called Tron Legacy. So
Oh,
in
nice.
that movie, there's two characters, Sam and Kevin. So Sam and Kevin are not just human representations, as you explained. They take their own decisions, and they live inside that particular digital world and take their own decisions, as I said. So that kind of gave me the basic foundation to think about this concept and how we can bring this identity and personality together and create a representation inside this digital universe. So that's the foundation and how the idea came into the picture. And I was thinking about some of the parallels like digital twins and digital self, as two parallels, but those things are very domain specific, as well as those things have a specific scope. But I wanted to have something got a bigger scope, as well as can improve in the future with technology, as well as business changes coming along. So that's where I thought digital double should represent everything, like people, things, and places in the digital universe, and then have various attributes around that. So that's basically the thinking pattern behind it, as well as the history behind how this concept came in action, basically.
That's really exciting. And by the way, Tron Legacy is an amazing movie. I love it, especially the new version of it. I
Exactly.
really like it. And I think I'm also going to go walk down memory lane here for a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So, as part of my PhD, I was working on having a granular way to manage user privacy and allowing users to have control to share different pieces of their data to different systems. This is really important, especially in verticals such as healthcare, right? I, as a person, want to share different kinds of data to my healthcare provider or a hospital, different pieces of data to my primary care physician, and to my payer, that is the insurance provider. So I want to have different kinds of data that I want to do. And while we have some safeguards in place, such as HIPAA and high trust, I, as a human, do not really have that fine tuned controls into the types of data that I want to share. Apple's medical ID, for example, is a good example where first responders can now have access to healthcare data that people are willing to share in case they're incapacitated. But it's still pretty preemptive, and it is static. Um, and another area where this kind of approach, having the digital double, will really help significantly is in the travel and the hospitality sector. I mean, you and I have talked about this in several of our episodes, and I want to underscore it once again. Especially for our frequent travelers, having a digital double that can represent the human is of great benefit. It can combine the data that these industries already produce, that possess. They collect a lot of data about us, and then combine it with behaviors, the likes, the dislikes, and other patterns that they observe through prior interactions, and create a pretty damn decent map of a human's personality. And then when we take that and overlay situational awareness on top of it, it provides a powerful experience that uh, I believe will truly delight the traveler. And I think this is where the fusion of identity and personality is so critical in creating successful digital doubles.
Exactly. I think you touched it nicely, because that's where even I think this fusion of identity and personality coming together. So, how we can have that attribute cloud. As you said, it is not kind of a one-to-one mapping. It's a very complex data model. I think that's where some of the concepts that you mentioned will come into the picture. So basically, when we look at the attributes, there can be various type of attributes. Some attributes are never changing. As an example, the DNA of that particular person, it's never changed. And then there are some of the attributes can change once in a while. As example, name. A person can change their name, but it's not frequently happening, right? And there are frequent changes, the location of that particular person, and then again, like their social status and what type of activities that they do. Those type of things can change frequently. The identifying those attributes and then associating it to that particular identity is where we can build this combination of identity and personality coming into the picture. But yes, in the system level, there should be a way to represent these relationships, and then store it in a way, as well as there should be a way to retrieve them easily for the applications, or the digital applications that end users are consuming.
Yeah, so I get really excited about the potential impacts of all of this, right? I mean, you touched upon something where there are pieces of data that will hardly change, like the DNA of the person, but then you have some things like names, and then you have other things like relationships. I mean, just imagine the potential ramification of introducing a digital double and capturing this kind of a construct of the human on something like a dating app or a dating profile.
Exactly.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to nerd out a little bit if you don't mind, but firstly, what I feel is that we will be relying heavily on graphs and trees rather than just relationship, because those are just better models to represent human interactions in my mind.
Yep.
And I foresee considerable investment in graph databases, graph data models, creating constructs that can represent this digital double. And again, I just mentioned that I've worked on context awareness and user privacy as part of my PhD, and this is why I geek out so much, right? In my thesis, I had created a data structure called a situational tree and then had a situational grammar to understand what situation the user was in and how the smart home could predict the next step and improve the experience of the user. I see a similar approach here where understanding the digital double will help us with better learning, predictive analytics, and prescriptive actions to identify user intent and perform those actions accordingly, learning from the behavior and modifying the digital double's personality as it learns. And that's the exciting part. The learning, the augmentation with technology, and improving human quality of life through these efforts. Especially, and this is where I'd focus on, was for patients who are suffering from, say, Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. This can be very life affirming. On the other hand, it can also provide a very personalized experience for people in the travel and the hospitality sector. So I see a lot of benefits and a lot of exciting things that we can do. However, I do want to bring in caution because we're talking about humans and we're talking about their data and we're talking about their personalities, right? So user privacy, data privacy issues will pop up, and this requires a much more pragmatic approach to the process of fusing identity and personality. I personally can see security challenges becoming literally personal. And for example, cyber stalking can take a whole different and a dark meaning when we're talking about these things. So we definitely need to tread carefully and deliberately as we dabble with these digital doubles. And we need the right safeguards in place and be very cautious. Not like how we're saying, for example, with some of these companies that are running head on um, into incorporating new things like large learning models, for example, into their products because it's part of the hype cycle, and not really pausing to think about the ramifications and ethical implications, especially in functions that drastically impact humans, such as human resources, marketing, or even sales. You know what? Asaka, why don't you give an example of how digital doubles can be effectively implemented? And let's at least scratch the surface of how it could look like.
Yeah, so I think two things here before jump into that. You mentioned about the dating applications, so that is one of the examples that I used in my first keynote as well, by telling usually you will miss your first date because your digital double is doing that first date before it will provide you recommendations. And then the privacy and security side, yes, even I did a keynote about the same topic in Europe, especially with the compliance requirements that Europe having as a geography. This question came from the audience as well. So that's where the identity will play a role here. So currently identity is geocentric. That means the provider owns the identity, not the actual person owns the identity. So what will happen? The geocentric identity will move into a more heliocentric identity. So that way person will control it, as well as he or she can provide the necessary consent based on the service provider, the trust they have with the service provider, as well as the service or the experience that they required from the service providers as well. So when it comes to examples, I think every industry will benefit from this concept, and you mentioned a couple of really good examples. One is about the healthcare side, and then I would like to bring the the shopping experience, basically coming from the day-to-day experiences that we require. As example, when you enter a department store, if you have an active digital double, that active digital double can guide you through the department store, because that's one problem we have in large department stores, to how to find the relevant items that you require, and you have to always talk to somebody. But if your digital double knows about your preferences, if it knows about the stock, if it knows about what type of items available, it can clearly guide you, as well as it can do the fit on for you and then show in your device as well. Then it will save a lot of time. Then you have a clear idea on how it will looks like before you purchase the item. So that is one example how we can improve it. And when I enter, most of the time when I enter a Nordstrom, this idea comes to my mind, because same problem I am facing whenever I go and try to purchase something.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it reminded me of two things. It was funny. We're talking this about this, and most of this usually has represented or manifested itself in some kind of a movie. You talked about Tron Legacy, which talked to you about this. For me, there are a couple of other science fiction movies that it does, especially where we're talking about smart homes and smart technology. But I want to talk about Minority Report. I mean, like there's a scene in Minority Report where you walk through, or even like Total Recall, so many science fiction movies that actually we talk about it, and it's exciting that we're finally at a point where we can make this a reality. So that's one thing I do want to point out. The other thing is it's funny. You give the example of dating because I was listening to this podcast, Land of the Giants, and their current or their recent most season is about dating apps. And one of the things they talked about is where people are already configuring dating bots like that have their own personality, and they are looking at allowing those bots see if they have compatibility before they have a real date. So we are closer than we think. It's exciting, but at the same time, it's scary. So pretty soon, you never know. We are going to converge, and it's going to be amazing. But let's summarize the discussion because this is a passionate topic, and we both can geek out, and I'm pretty sure even the audience will feel really excited about this. But let me summarize the discussion. So. Customer behavior we know has changed in the recent years, and we need to have an outside-in approach when designing systems and products. It has to be focused on the experience that a customer has. And this is why evolving into an experience economy is crucial for an organization obsessed with customers. Secondly, a digital double is the most efficient way to improve customer experience by fusing identity and personality of the human and operating on their intent and situations. Thirdly, we already have digital identities and now need to expand it with personalities. And while it is it's pretty exciting. We need to have a more pragmatic approach and ensure that we have the right safeguards and deliberate upon the ethical and privacy implications for humans. So I hope you all have enjoyed this episode of Spirited Dialogue, where we have discussed digital doubles and how to fuse identity and personality into an experience economy. Please share your thoughts, insights, fears, any favorite movies that have really inspired you, and feedback in the comments or in the contact form. And until next time, from all of us at Transformity, cheers.
Cheers, and catch you in another episode.